All right. We're still in the Sermon on the Mount, and so again, if you're one of those people that likes to follow along with written, you can just scan the QR code. You'll have all the message notes, and you can follow along if you'd like to do that. By the way, for those that don't know, we also put that QR code up at the back of the sanctuary, so when you walk in on a Sunday, you don't even have to wait till now. You can scan it as you come in, which is kind of cool. But we've been going through this Sermon on the Mount. We're reaching the end. We've only got a few weeks left in looking at this whole Sermon on the Mount. And what we've been talking about through this entire message series is simply this concept right here, that living the way of God's kingdom is the path to life as it was meant to be. And what Jesus did is he said, look, I want to explain to you what was intended when God put all the things in place in the law. And so the people at the time, just like us, they struggled with the right way to live and to do all the things right. And he says, well, you're getting too hung up on what the religious people are telling you to do, and you're missing what God the Father is passionate about. And so he spends this entire Sermon on the Mount unpacking what matters to God. And so what we said was, when we do this, when we live according to these principles, our lives become a reflection of the heart of God the Father. And what's really interesting, if you've been with us through this entire series, is that Jesus simultaneously releases people from the burdens of trying to follow all the rules and regulations and raises the bar on a life of holiness and following Him. Kind of does them both at the same time. Very interesting. And He's very practical. He's talked about prayer, conflict, money, worry, and a whole bunch more. He didn't really shy away from anything. And today is no exception, because He didn't shy away from this particular problem that I think is probably as relevant today as it's ever been in the history of this country particularly. So, let me pray for us, and then let's take a look at it. Lord, thank you again for this morning, a chance to not only hear from you, but to celebrate what you're doing. Thank you for all the ways you've been working through us, to be able to pour your love and grace out on people by serving them, by praying for them. Thank you for the humility that comes from asking people, inviting people to pray for us, and inviting them, that vulnerability that says, we want people to be part of our lives who don't know you. Would you expand those opportunities? Give us more opportunities to pray. Give us more opportunities to invite, and increase our boldness. And God, as we look at this topic this morning of judging other people, would you enlighten us that we might reflect the heart of the Father more deeply? It's in your name we pray. Amen. You know, about 5 years ago, there was a cemetery in Bellevue, Massachusetts. And they did what some of these places do. They put flags out on the graves of veterans, right? We like those kind of things. And they were being taken. They were vanishing, right? This is not new. You've probably heard stories like this. And if you're like me and you hear the story of, they put out these flags, they're honoring the veterans, and the flags disappear, you're like, oh, okay, who's doing this now, right? Is this some group making a statement about, the state of our country? Is it someone who just doesn't like the military? Is it some person from the far right or the far left? Well, the people in the cemetery that ran this, they wanted to understand. So they asked the police, can you come investigate this? Because it's almost like vandalism, even though they weren't wrecking the tombstones. Do you know who the culprit was? A woodchuck, who was taking the flags and using it to line its burrow. And it wasn't even the first time, because back in 2012, they found a similar incident in New York where 75 flags disappeared and a woodchuck decided to make them part of his burrow. Things are not always what they seem. This is true with people, too. If you're a baseball person, you know who George Steinbrenner was, correct? Right? He was the owner of the New York Yankees, the emperor of the evil empire, right? He was, in his tenure, he probably fired more people than any of us would ever even consider hiring. He just wasn't a good guy. But it's very interesting because Rick Cerrone, who worked for them after being playing, he says, not a lot of people know this about George, but he would read a story about someone in the newspaper who was having a hard time, and he would just find them, and he would help them without getting any credit. He picked up random people's medical bills. He was a very magnanimous, generous person. And I thought, huh? Didn't square with what I knew. But it works in reverse, does it not? I mean, there's all these people that these as religious leaders, we hold them up as paragons of virtue and leadership, and we want to emulate them. And then we hear the whole story of their life. and we think, wow, that was not who I thought they were. Judging others is rampant in our society today. People judge politicians, not even on what they say, but on someone said about what they heard about what they said, right? We judge them on that. We judge athletes and celebrities either very harshly or very magnanimously, and it can flip on a dime. We judge in the church. We judge pastors. We judge we judge our leaders' spirituality. We decide, they're not spiritual. They're not doing the right thing. They're in the wrong. I'm going to leave and go here. And we judge all the time. We're always trying to determine what's wrong. And what's ironic is we live in a culture that says, don't judge me. Right? That's what we see all the time. You can't judge me. God's my only judge. You can't tell me what I can or cannot do. And yet we do this all the time. And if you've ever read any of these studies, they say that the first 30 seconds or the first 2 minutes of when you meet someone, you make a judgment on what they're like. Right? They say the first 30 seconds of a job interview often determines whether you get the job or not. Right? We are prone to these snap judgments, and we do this all the time. This is not new. And so Jesus, who is speaking to a group of people, and particularly here, these Pharisees who are part of this whole religious kind of thing, he starts to speak into this idea of judging. Here's what he says. Hold on. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. Probably the most misused, or one of the most misused verses in the entire Bible. Because people read this and they say, see, you don't judge me, I don't judge you. We're not supposed to do that. But there's a problem, because that doesn't square with lots of other scriptures, which seems to tell us we're supposed to judge other people. In fact, it doesn't even square with what Jesus is going to say in about 15 verses in the same message about judging other people. So you're like, okay, so what's going on here? Jesus is saying don't judge. What's he really saying? Well, let me read the whole thing, and then let's talk about it. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. I mean, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye. Then you'll see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. And then, it's like Jesus has a seizure, because the next verse makes no sense. Do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and will turn and tear you to pieces. What? All right, we'll come to that. Jesus is leaning into this idea of judgment, and I was trying to think, like, how can we put something that we can remember on this? And so here's what I want you to take from this morning. We're going to unpack this in a second. When Jesus is talking about judging, we need to learn to practice the pause. Practice the pause. We need to learn. Everybody knows pausing, right? You do it with your movies, you do it with your music. It's to stop everything for a period of time before continuing. And it's usually for a purpose. It's either to go get a snack or to do something else. And Jesus explains why and how this looks like. So let's take a look. I think there's 3 pauses, 3 things we have to do. Because the first thing he pulls out here is that attitude and motive matter in judgment. See, judging people is actually not the issue. The issue is judging people without love. That's the problem. And so when Jesus says, do not judge, the word he's using here doesn't mean don't have a judge, like don't have a court trial, don't do that. That's not what he's talking about. It's not even about this idea of discerning or trying to understand or evaluate other people. It is to be critical and to look down on others with superiority. It's to condemn, right? All without a spirit of love. It's that habit of criticism, sharp criticism that we have. In fact, our word critic comes from this Greek word. So when Jesus says, do not judge, he's referring to that fault-finding, condemning, hypercritical spirit that it is so easy to have. And the key issue is the absence of love. Do you know that one of the most dominant views of Christianity in the United States is that Christians are judgmental? They did a study, and they were focusing on 16 to 29-year-olds, right? And in this study, 90 90, articulated the opinion that Christians are judgmental. And what's interesting wasn't that they didn't really have a problem that people would get involved in someone else's life. That wasn't the issue. It was the how they did it. And so the people who did this study, they said when it comes right down to it, this is what the people who responded said. It being judgmental, Christians who are being judgmental, it's fueled by self-righteousness, the misguided inner motivation to make our own life look better by comparing it to the lives of others. And you might think, well, that's not it. But probably deservedly so at some level, 9 out of 10 young people think that's what Christians do. See, like a lot of issues, this one can be very subtle because we think, well, I don't judge people. I don't do that. But when we live as critics all the time, and I've met many of them, I've been one. We often do that because it justifies ourselves. We feel better about our actions and our attitudes. When we stereotype a group of people like, well, that's who they are, we're elevating ourselves. We feel better about our own way of thinking. We feel like we're right. Maybe when we judge, it's just this inner desire to see someone else suffer. You ever had that? Something bad happens, you're like, yeah, okay, yep. Because I knew they were wrong. I knew that's the kind of person they were. Or maybe just you're one of those people that just thinks you have it all figured out. You know what the right way is. You know what the God way is. You understand the scriptures completely. And you just want everybody else to fall in line with how you see things. I don't know. But we don't say that. You know what we say? I'm just discerning in my spirit. Or I'm just trying to protect the church. I'm just trying to expose sin for what it is. Jesus says, hold on a second. There's a connection between how you treat others and how you will be treated. And how you judge other people is how you're going to be judged. His brother, James, said it this way: speak and act as those who are going to be judged by the law that gives freedom, because judgment without mercy will be shown to anyone who has not been merciful. Mercy triumphs over judgment. Jesus says, look, the standard you use for others is the standard that's going to be used on you. There was a July 2018, some South African officials, game preserve people, they were in one of the game preserves and they found this gruesome discovery. They found the remains of at least 3 men. They found a rifle, they found an axe, they found shoes, they found clothing. And so when they did some investigation, they came to the conclusion that this was a small group of men who had snuck onto the animal reserve to poach rhinos because they wanted their horns. They're very valuable. And in doing so, a pride of lions found them, killed them, and ate them. And most people that read the article went, yeah. They came in here to kill animals. Animals killed them. Serves them right. Interesting, isn't it? And yet, when Jesus says that's how it's going to work for you, and the thing you're going to do and the way you judge, that's how you're going to be judged, that's not altogether comfortable. So let me ask you this question. How comfortable would you be if Jesus judged you? In other words, he evaluated you, he criticized you, he pointed out your faults, he pointed out your sins the same way and to the same degree that you do to others. How would you feel? What do you think of that? Picture how you've lived your life for the last 6 months and the way you've evaluated the world around you and the people around you and the way they do their things and what you criticize, and to ask yourself, if Jesus did that for me, what would that be like? Because that's what Jesus is saying. What you do, that's what comes back. So, practicing the pause. What does that mean for this first one? It's simply this. Is when we have this desire to criticize or to get angry or to judge or to be frustrated or to kind of go after someone, pause long enough to ask if our judgment, this judgment that we're making, is genuinely based on and going to be exercised in Christ-like love for the other person. Because if we're honest, the answer is often, no. I just want to make sure they understand they're wrong. Right? I just want to prove something. I just want to make sure, that they steer in the right direction. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but it's worth asking the question because Jesus says how you do this matters. And of course, he's speaking to the Pharisees who love to point out the flaws of everybody. So when he's talking to these people, his disciples, he's like, look, that's how they judge. They think they're better than everybody else. They want to make sure that everybody knows why they're wrong. Be careful. Because then he goes on to say, it's not just simply about your attitude. It also is about where you point the magnifying glass. Because judgment starts at home. So he goes through this whole thing of this word picture of the speck of sawdust in someone else's eye and a plank in your own, right? It's a deliberate exaggeration. And remember, Jesus is talking to followers of his, and he uses this term brothers. So his focus here is primarily on judging other people who follow Jesus, not so much the world out there, but inside the walls of the church. And he says, man, it is easy to point out the flaws in other people and ignore the ones we have. It's like someone has a little speck of dirt in their eye, and your eyes are crusted over with pink eye, and you're like, I'll help you out. Let me show you what's going on, right? You wouldn't do that. We censor the tiny flaws in others and forget about our shortcomings. Now, understand, this is not a statement of lesser and greater sins. Like this idea of a speck and a plank, Jesus is not saying, well, their sins are all small, yours are all big, deal with yours first. That's not his point at all, because sometimes often that's not true. It's this idea of where do you put your priority in judging first. He's actually condemning that self-righteous hypocrisy, that's why he uses the word hypocrites, of judging other people for their sins while overlooking your own, which we do constantly. But there's a big problem with this, because anytime we go to judge someone else without judging ourselves first, our judgment is impaired. And you all know this, because if you try, like we said, if you try and fix someone else or do something to help them when you can't see properly, you're not going to be any good. It's like if my wife says, hey, can you help me do this? Can you help do this button or this clip? And I'm not wearing my glasses? It's completely irrelevant. I'm guessing. I can't really see. It's kind of all out of focus. It's blurry. Well, that happens, right? If it's like that, your judgment is impaired. You can't see clearly. I'll never forget this. Wasn't a pastor yet, so this is many years ago, but we were good friends of the pastor of the church we were at. So we knew him, we hung out with his family, I kind of knew what his heart was, I knew how he viewed things. And I remember someone else in the church coming and say, oh, pastor he just doesn't care about the kids. I mean, he always is just focusing on only this, and he doesn't care about the kids. And I said, really? How do you know that? Oh, I can just tell. Okay. I knew him. I talked to him. I knew where his heart was. Their discernment, completely wrong. They had no clue. But they were very intent on judging, and they ignored all the problems that were going on in their own lives. The picture that Jesus is pointing here is there's no way to clearly see what's going on with someone else if we ignore our own problems. Now, obviously, he's not saying you have to fix all your own problems before you can talk to someone else, because then we would never talk to anybody, because we never fix all of our problems. That's not the issue, right? He's not like, get yourself perfect before you talk, but it's this idea of, hey, pay attention to yourself first before you go off judging someone else. Which means simply this: we need to confront from a posture of humility and grace all the time. We know from future statements, again, that Jesus isn't saying we shouldn't judge. He's just saying, before you do, check inside first. I would say maybe this way: if you cannot confront someone else with humility and love, then do not confront them, because you have more work to do on yourself. Just don't do it. Because the positive side of this is, remember we said the first idea was pausing to see if this is motivated by Christ-like love. Do you know that if it's motivated by a Christ-like love, you will never judge someone else before looking at yourself? Because that's what God's love does. It starts to work on us. So, second part, practicing the pause. It means pausing long enough to ask the Holy Spirit to help ourselves to judge ourselves as honestly, as a matter of first priority. In other words, before I go off on their sin and all the problems they have, to just pause and say, hold on. God, is there business you need to be doing in me? What's up right now? Not only am I asking the question, is this motivated by love, but have I been honest with who I am? The most self-righteous judging people are often the most ignorant of their own faults. And I've seen that over and over and over again, and probably been one of them. Last part. We must then always seek discernment. This is that verse that makes you go, huh? Because you're like, all right, you're talking about judging. I get it. Jesus, I'm with you. And I am convinced, this is just me, that Jesus would do this, and the 12 disciples would be listening, and you'd see one of them look at the other and go, do you understand? The other guy's like, I don't know what he's talking about. You know, and you can hear them nudging each other like, did you get that? And they're like, we have no clue. Like, do you want to ask him? No, I'm not going to ask him. I'm look stupid, right? Like, you could just see this going on, right? And I'm pretty sure Jesus did this on purpose sometimes. But he's making a very interesting point here because he kind of spins it a little bit sideways, and he talks about this idea of don't give dogs what is sacred and don't throw your pearls to pigs. So understanding the culture a little bit, dogs in those days were not like dogs today. They weren't pets. They tended to be scavengers. They would roam in packs. You know, there wasn't the nice warm cuddly, you don't bring your dog home. That's not how they viewed dogs. And so they were a little bit, you had to be careful with them, right? Because if the pack could turn on you if you weren't careful. And I did not know this till I was reading it this week. Pearls were considered the most valuable thing. They were more valuable than diamonds. And pigs, of course, were unclean to the Jews. And he's saying, don't throw these very valuable things in front of the pigs. What he's basically saying is use discernment when you do certain things. He's actually moving, because of the context, most people think he's moving from inside the church to outside the church. That's why he's using metaphors like dogs and pigs, because in that culture, that's what they talked about when they talked about the Gentiles. And he's basically saying, look, there will be a point in time with what you do, you have to know and discern when to stop. It actually connects to his old thing when he was told the disciples, he sent them out on mission, and he said, if someone doesn't listen to you, if you're presenting the gospel, if you're sharing the love of Jesus, and they utterly reject it and turn on you, you can shake the dust off your feet and say, okay, I'm done. And so he's kind of leaning into this with the disciples. He's saying, look, I want you to exercise discernment when you deal with people. You have to know when to pull in, when to pull out, when to lean in, when not, because we're supposed to share the gospel and the good news with everybody, but he says there will be points where the way you're doing it, you need to back off. But you need to have discernment on how you do this. It should never be done lightly or easily. And the funny part of this is we think we're pretty good at this. We think we're good at discerning. I've rarely met someone who says, I can't read people at all. But I've had many people say, oh, I can just tell. I can just tell. I know what they're thinking. I know what their motives are. I know why they do what they do. They're almost never right. When you do this, you're not right. I've had more people come to me and say things about me, and I'm like, where did you get that? That's just totally wrong, right? We do this all the time. Malcolm Gladwell, in his book, Talking to Strangers, did a whole study on this, about how we have these impressions, and they're just most often wrong. And he used this great example. In 1938, Neville Chamberlain was the Prime Minister of Britain. And Hitler was starting to get some power. People were getting a little concerned with Hitler. And this is pre-World War II by a year. So he goes to Munich to meet with Hitler. And his whole purpose on his trip was to evaluate Hitler, to see what his character was like, to see if he was a threat. And after meeting with him, he came back and told the press, I have met with him. I can trust him. It's all good. Which is why when they needed a new prime minister, he was not the guy. All judgment begins with prayer, listening, and reflecting. So, how do you practice the pause? Pause and seek God for discernment, for understanding, and for a loving heart. So, let me leave you with a couple diagnostic questions before we kind of jump into the next part of our service. Am I a critic? I'm not asking you to evaluate me. This is something you're doing. I'm not asking you if I'm a critic. I'm saying, ask this question of yourself. Am I a critic? You might be, if you more easily find the fault and the problems in others than the good in them. Or if you find satisfaction in highlighting the supposed failures of other people. Do I regularly think that I have a better handle on life than other people? In other words, I got this figured out. I know the best way to parent. I know exactly how the church should work. I know how people should lead. I know which political party should do what it should do, and I know how they should do it. I know the way finances should work. If you find yourself in that place, are you a person who thinks you have a better handle on life than everybody else? By the way, this is also true in cultures. One of the reasons that Americans are both loved and despised around the world is Americans tend to think they have a better handle on the world than every other culture. Am I a complainer? Which, by the way, is a way of judging, especially when it comes to other people. You might be. If you're frequently upset at other people's actions, you find yourself stereotyping them, see, they're just like that. They're always like that. I can't believe it. I cannot tell you how many posts I've seen on Facebook that start with, I was in the Walmart parking lot today. And then they go on and complain, and they stereotype people. It's crazy, right? It's that complaining critic spirit. And here's the last one. Do I find the sins of others more serious than my own? This one is hard to be honest about because you look at a world that is falling apart around us, that is descending into evil actions that we can't even comprehend. And we think, oh, how horrific that is, how horrible that is. And we can spend all our energy there instead of saying, God, but what about this? Okay, but that's not really that serious. I mean, I understand that's just not that big a deal. I wonder. We're not supposed to judge without dealing with our own hearts first. So practice the pause. Pause and ask, am I acting in genuine love and concern for the other person? Is this really motivated by that? And don't take the pat answer for it. And say, Jesus, is this really what's going on? Pause to say, have I taken sufficient time and energy on myself? Right? Have I turned the magnifying glass this way? And have I sought God for an understanding and loving heart? If you pause, ask those questions, and you can answer yes, then by all means, engage with the other person. Because if we did, after answering those, you know what? They will not feel judged. Even though they're being judged. They don't feel that way. I wonder if we lived this way as a church, and we did it for 100 years, and they repeated the same survey. I wonder what we would be known for. Maybe, in fact, instead of thinking us as judging people, they might actually be drawn to Jesus because of how we love.